It's Saturday, February 21st, and I'm nearly 100% sure that our current severe weather risk today is going to overperform. Currently, we just have a pretty weak marginal risk situated over the southern parts of Alabama and Georgia. Not only do I think our risk is going to be a little bit more towards the central parts of those states, but I also think it's going to expand quite a bit more westward, even into parts of eastern Mississippi. And this is going to last essentially pretty much through a large portion of the day. And I think this is going to be an all hazards risk, so a tornado threat. I think this is going to span a much larger area than what is currently painted here. Same for that wind threat. For our tornadoes, I wouldn't even be shocked to see quite a few tornadoes actually in what is going to be our line today. For our wind, would not blow me away to see 70-mile-an-hour gusts. And for hail, there's currently no risk at all. I think there definitely is going to be a decent chance of hail, and I wouldn't be shocked to see hailstones at probably 1.5 inches in diameter. And we're going to start to see the stones for this get laid out in the very, very early morning hours today, probably around 3 a.m. We're going to want to watch this area for our first area of convection and what's going to eventually become our main cluster of storms that marches eastward until it eventually comes out in the Atlantic Ocean. We're going to see all of this convection right here. This is from part of yesterday's risk, which ended up pretty much being a complete dud because it was all north of the boundary. So there's just all super cool and dry air, no instability for these storms to work with at all. So that's why those storms aren't really doing much of anything. But we're going to want to look at a couple of things as we go into the night hours. One is going to be this cluster out here in parts of central eastern Georgia. When these storms cluster, they're actually not going to be north of the boundary and they're going to be riding pretty close to it. There's actually a bit of a warm front complex here even. And when those storms get close to it, there is a small chance that these could actually produce severe weather. And I think the chance of them producing all hazards is non-zero. So that's definitely going to be one to watch. So tornadoes, damaging winds, and hail is going to be possible. Will that be a super high chance? No, but I definitely do think this is going to be probably the strongest cluster during this time tonight. But as we go forwards, probably until about 2 hours before sunrise now, we're going to start looking at this cluster right here that spawns off in pretty much central Mississippi. At first, not really going to be that strong, but it's going to get its act together pretty quick. I think probably even an hour after sunrise, I think it has the potential to start producing severe weather. And at that point, it would be in eastern Mississippi. This is going to ride our cold front pretty much all the way up. Then here is going to be our warm front complex. We have a couple of low pressure systems embedded in here as well, helping with our convection. And what we're going to notice is that even our shear vectors, one of the reasons why I think that tornado threat is going to be a bit more amplified today, they are nearly parallel to our line. And whenever we see that, there's definitely a greater chance to see better spin there. We're also seeing a lot of warm air advection from the Gulf and a couple of confluence bands in here. So we're going to see a lot of little blips in front of this line. And when they crash into a line, there's actually a decent probability that they momentarily increase the spin in these storms and can strengthen them up to the point where they could drop a brief tornado. So during this time, I really think the peak is when these storms are going to reach probably around central Georgia. That is when they're going to have the availability to the most favorable storm ingredients. And even though they start to get a little bit more disorganized as we go into the mid-afternoon hours, probably the early afternoon to midday is when we're going to see this event peak. But as we go into the mid to late afternoon hours, things are going to start to settle down. I really think there's going to be a severe potential with this main cluster all the way until it exits out into the Atlantic, probably around the evening hours. I don't think the risk with these storms on the tail end of our cluster are going to pose as much of a risk. I definitely think there's going to be a general thunderstorm risk there, but to see severe weather out of those would be more unlikely. And then we're going to see once a giant shortwave moves through a giant shortwave trough, we're going to start to see a lot of this weaker convection back here. And none of this is really going to pose a threat. At this point, the cold front is going to be quite a bit further south. All of this stuff is going to be north of the cold front. So they're dealing with cool, dry, stable air. And it looks like it's just going to be a lot of steady rain. This is also going to extend up really far into the mid-Atlantic. So even though we didn't see a thunderstorm risk for this area, it doesn't mean there's going to be no rain at all. It just means these storms are in very stable air. So it looks like precipitation and snow is all we're going to be getting out of these. And about that shortwave trough that I'm mentioning right there, we're actually going to see it move very, very rapidly, probably around the midday hours. It's going to be up near Nebraska. And as we go to when we see kind of that explosion of that weak convection, it's going to move in about 6 hours all the way down to where Tennessee, Arkansas, Missouri, those types of states kind of connect right there. And that's going to just provide a bunch of forcing and lift for those storms. So even though our lapse rates are really poor up here and it's a bunch of stable air, we're still going to be able to see that possible. And then we also just have a lot of northwesterly flow that's going to be pretty favorable, especially for these storms down here in our main risk area to get some really good shear and forcing kind of motion in the atmosphere. And now we're going to do our deep dive on our storms today. This is for that cluster that we could see in parts of central eastern Georgia at very, very early in the morning today. And this is one of the reasons right here why I think there's a potential to see all hazards. So that's hail, tornadoes, and damaging winds. Our CAPE is going to be close to 500 and our shear parameters are going to be really, really solid. Nearly 200 surface helicity, 25 knots of low level shear, and 75 knots of deep layer shear. That's going to be the big one, especially for this. Also, our precipitable water is quite high, around 1.81 inches. That's going to increase the probability of maybe getting some stronger downdrafts. And this storm is going to be surface based along with a nice curvature and then elongation in our hodograph. And we even have some weak wind veering right here. So this storm cluster, I would not be surprised to see it go severe or even tornado warned in that small window. It only has about a 2-hour window before it starts getting into those more unfavorable conditions that we talked about north of our fronts today. So until that, kind of when it's riding really, really close to that boundary, it could have the potential to definitely do something. And then this is a sounding from when our storms are going to be around the eastern Mississippi area, and that main cluster finally starts to get its act together. And it's definitely no secret why or surprise when we look at the ingredients. We're seeing nearly 1,000 CAPE, nearly 80 to 103 CAPE, and we're also seeing really good shear at this point. We're seeing that plus 100 surface helicity, over 20 knots of low level shear, and around 60 to 70 knots of deep layer shear. We're also seeing a little curvature in our hodograph, nice elongation. This storm is also going to be surface based. The only thing is that we do have a bit of a stable profile here at the surface. Our dew points and temperature is going to be really, really close. But we also see that we don't really have any capping anywhere at this point. Our lapse rates aren't going to be poor. We also have some dry air loft and a decently high precipitable water, and our downdraft CAPE is going to be in between around 750 to 1,000 for a lot of these storms. So at this point even though it's only about an hour after sunrise and these storms are all the way in eastern Mississippi, I think there is going to absolutely be a potential for all hazards to be possible even this early in the day. And then this is when I think our storms will peak, probably around 2 p.m. today. And once again, our thermodynamics are looking super solid. We have around a 70-degree Fahrenheit dew point. That's going to be really, really good. We kind of see little bit of a erosion of that stable layer. We can see that our temperatures have gone up. Now our dew point temperature spread is looking really, really good. These storms are absolutely going to be surface based. We're having around 2,000 CAPE at this point and over 153 CAPE, close to 1,000 downdraft CAPE, and we're still seeing a decently high precipitable water. All of these things tell me, also including, I almost forgot to mention, our shear parameters still really good. Over 100 surface helicity, close to 20 knots of low level shear, and then around 60 knots of deep layer shear. All of these things are pointing towards definitely these storms are going to produce some tornadoes at the minimum. Also, wind gusts even up to maybe 70 miles an hour. And because we have all of this CAPE up here and our lapse rates are pretty solid, I would not be shocked, even though it's going to be more of a linear storm mode, to see hail even up to 1.5 inches in diameter. Some areas it looks like we could have more of a embedded supercell mode instead of just a straight damaging line of storms. So that's another reason why I think our hail threat could be a little bit more. I would be surprised if the Storm Prediction Center doesn't bump this up to a slight risk tomorrow, but we'll definitely have to wait and see. And I also think there's almost a 100% chance guarantee that this storm is going to overperform than what is currently painted.